The scent of sugar and roses clung to the warm afternoon air, a cloying sweetness that mirrored the gilded cage my life had become. It was Ava's 5th birthday, an extravaganza that had taken weeks of meticulous planning and a budget that could have purchased a small island. A blush-pink castle, inflated to impossible proportions, dominated the manicured lawn of our estate, its turrets scraping the pristine blue sky. A professional mermaid with an iridescent tail swam languidly in our Olympic-sized pool, her siren song mingling with the delighted shrieks of children. Ponies, bedecked in ribbons and glitter, patiently carried their giggling cargo in gentle circles around the ancient oak tree. Every detail was perfect, every moment curated for maximum impact, a testament to the life my husband, Jason, had built. A life where I was the chief curator, the silent partner in the business of appearing flawlessly happy. I smoothed down the front of my cream-colored linen dress, a nervous habit I'd developed over the years. From my vantage point on the flagstone patio, I had a clear view of the entire spectacle. I saw my daughter, Ava, her face a perfect miniature of mine, framed by honey-blonde curls, her eyes wide with a joy so pure it was a physical ache in my chest. She was chasing butterflies near the rose bushes, her laughter the most beautiful sound in the world. For her, this day was magic. For me, it was another performance. Jason stood near the champagne fountain, a crystal monstrosity that flowed with vintage Dom Perignon. He was the sun around which our universe orbitated. Tall, impossibly handsome with his dark, perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that could disarm world leaders, he commanded attention effortlessly. He was talking to Andrew and Christopher, two of his top executives, his hand gestures sharp and decisive even in a social setting. He caught my eye across the lawn and lifted his glass in a mock toast. The smile didn't quite reach his eyes. It rarely did anymore. For 10 years, I had played my part with unwavering dedication. I was Emily, the perfect wife to the financial magnate Jason Montgomery. I hosted his dinners, charmed his clients, managed his homes, and raised his beautiful daughter. I had shelved my own ambitions, a degree in forensic accounting left to gather dust along with my maiden name. It was a trade-off, a bargain I had made with my eyes wide open. He provided a world of unimaginable luxury, and I provided the serene, stable backdrop against which his success could shine. It was a partnership, or so I had told myself. But lately, the silence in our sprawling mansion felt heavier, the distance between his side of the bed and mine a vast, uncrossable chasm. His compliments had become assessments, his affection a transaction. "Everything is simply breathtaking, Emily," a voice chirped beside me. It was Madison, one of the other mothers from Ava's preschool, her eyes scanning the scene with a mixture of awe and envy. "You've really outdone yourself." "Thank you, Madison," I smiled, the expression feeling practiced, brittle. "I just wanted it to be a special day for Ava." "Special? It's the event of the season. Jason must be so proud." My eyes drifted back to him. He had finished his conversation and was now striding towards me, his path cutting directly through the heart of the party. He moved with a predatory grace, an inherent confidence that made people instinctively step aside. As he approached, I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. The air around him seemed to shimmer with an intensity that could be both thrilling and terrifying. Today, it felt like a warning. He stopped in front of me, his shadow falling over my face, blocking out the sun. His smile was a thin, tight line. He wasn't looking at me, but through me. "Emily," he said, his voice low and devoid of its usual charm. It was the voice he used in the boardroom, the one that stripped away pretense and went straight for the kill. "Jason, is everything all right?" I asked, my own voice a near whisper. Madison, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, gave a little cough and muttered something about needing to find her son, Tyler, before scurrying away. He didn't answer immediately. He let the silence hang between us, a heavy, suffocating blanket. He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored blazer and pulled out a thick, folded sheaf of papers, bound by a crisp blue cover. My heart began a frantic, panicked tattoo against my ribs. They were legal documents. "What is that?" I managed, the words catching in my throat. His eyes, the color of cold steel, finally met mine. There was no warmth, no flicker of the man I had once loved. the man who had once looked at me as if I were the only person in the world. There was only a chilling finality. "I believe this is the most efficient way to handle this," he stated, his tone flat, businesslike. He thrust the documents into my hand. My fingers felt numb as they closed around the stiff paper. "Happy birthday to Ava. I've already deposited a substantial sum into a trust for her. She will, of course, be well taken care of." The world tilted on its axis. The laughter of children, the gentle melody from the string quartet near the patio, the splash of the mermaid's tail, it all faded into a dull, distant roar. The only thing I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own blood in my ears. What are you talking about?" I stammered, my gaze fixed on the bold, block letters on the cover sheet. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." "I'm talking about our marriage, Emily, or rather the end of it." He said it so calmly, so dispassionately, as if he were discussing a quarterly earnings report. He glanced around at the opulent party, the perfect world I had so carefully constructed for him, for us. A flicker of something, was it disdain, crossed his features. This whole arrangement," he gestured vaguely at the castle, the ponies, at me. "It's run its course. It's time to liquidate the asset." "Asset?" The word was a foreign object on my tongue, sharp and bitter. "Jason, this is our life. This is our daughter's birthday party." My voice cracked, a desperate plea for him to see the absurdity, the cruelty of his timing. Guests were starting to notice, their curious glances turning into blatant stares. I could feel their eyes on me, 100 tiny needles pricking my skin. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Don't be so naive, Emily. This was never a life, it was a merger, a strategic partnership. You were beautiful, polished, from a good family. You provided the right image, the stability I needed while I built my empire. And for that, you were compensated handsomely." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "But the numbers don't lie. The returns have diminished. You've become complacent. The cost of maintenance has begun to outweigh the benefits. To put it in terms you might understand, you are no longer a good investment." Each word was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs, shattering the fragile facade of my existence. "A bad investment." The phrase echoed in the hollow space where my heart used to be. I wasn't his wife, his partner, the mother of his child. I was a stock that had plummeted, a property that had depreciated. I looked at this man, this stranger in a bespoke suit, and felt a cold, terrifying clarity. The love I had clung to, the memories I had cherished, they were all part of a prospectus he had long since discarded. I looked past his shoulder and saw Ava. She had stopped chasing butterflies and was watching us, her small brow furrowed with a confusion that broke me. She saw her mother, frozen and pale, and her father, a figure of cold authority. She knew something was wrong. Her smile, the radiant center of my universe, had vanished. A wave of nausea washed over me. The humiliation was a physical entity, a venom spreading through my veins, hot and shameful. He had done this deliberately. Not in the privacy of our bedroom, not in a lawyer's sterile office, but here, in front of everyone. He wasn't just divorcing me, he was destroying me, writing me off as a failed acquisition in the most public way imaginable. He wanted to make it clear that I was nothing without him. He was erasing me from the narrative of his success. My hand, the one holding the papers, began to tremble. I looked down at them, at the cold, black ink that spelled out the end of my world. My mind raced, a chaotic whirlwind of shock and pain. 10 years of my life, summarized and dismissed in a legal document. 10 years of loving him, supporting him, believing in him, all for nothing. He straightened his tie, his expression unreadable. "My lawyers will be in touch with yours," he said, his voice returning to its normal public volume as if he had just concluded a mundane piece of business. "I'll be staying at the city penthouse. I think it's best if you vacate the premises within the week. Don't worry," he added, a final, cruel twist of the knife. "The settlement is generous, enough for you to start a new, smaller life." He turned to walk away, to rejoin the party as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of it. He was already moving on, already calculating his next move, his next acquisition. But as he turned, something inside me shifted. The shock began to recede, replaced by a slow-burning ember of rage. It started deep in my gut, a primal protective fire. He thought he could discard me like a piece of outdated technology. He thought he had all the power, held all the cards. He thought I was just a pretty, complacent accessory whose only value was tied to his name. He had made a critical error in his calculations. He had forgotten who I was before I became Mrs. Jason Montgomery. He had forgotten about the mind I had, the skills I possessed. He had forgotten that for a decade, I wasn't just planning parties and picking out draperies. I was watching. I was listening. I was learning. And most importantly, he had forgotten where he hid his secrets. He believed they were secure, locked away behind layers of impenetrable firewalls and complex encryption. He was a financial genius, after all, but he'd made one small, arrogant mistake. He trusted me to be ignorant. He trusted me to be the docile, decorative wife he had so carefully molded. He had no idea that the quiet, unassuming tablet I used for organizing menus and responding to school emails held the key to his entire empire. A backdoor he himself had inadvertently created years ago, a digital breadcrumb trail leading to every shell corporation, every offshore account, every illegal transaction that had built his throne of lies. He had just called me a bad investment. He was about to learn the true meaning of a hostile takeover. My trembling stopped. My fingers tightened on the divorce papers. I lifted my chin, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of the woman I used to be. The smart, ambitious woman with a mind for numbers and an intolerance for bullies. I looked across the lawn at my daughter, my beautiful, innocent Ava. This wasn't just about my pride anymore. This was for her. I would not let this man turn her mother into a cautionary tale, a footnote in his biography. My mind was suddenly calm, the chaos replaced by a singular, ice-cold purpose. I knew exactly what I needed to do. It all came down to one thing, one password. One little string of characters he had once whispered to me in a moment of drunken hubris, a password he believed I had long forgotten. A password that would unlock his ruin and my redemption. He had served me papers. I was about to serve him justice. The world snapped back into focus with brutal clarity. The string quartet was now playing a cheerful Vivaldi piece, a soundtrack grotesquely at odds with the demolition of my life. Jason was gone, swallowed back into the crowd of his adoring sycophants. He was probably accepting congratulations on the success of the party, the perfect host, while the divorce papers in my hand felt like a lead weight, pulling me down into an abyss of public shame. I could feel the whispers slithering through the crowd, the sideways glances, the sudden, hushed conversations that ended the moment I looked over. They had all seen it. The exchange, the look on my face, the official transfer of powerlessness. But the ember of rage was now a steady, controlled burn. Powerlessness? No, that was the role he had assigned me, but I was done playing the part. My first thought was of Ava. I scanned the lawn and saw her by the candy floss machine, her face alight with innocent delight, oblivious to the earthquake that had just ripped her family apart. I had to protect her. I had to maintain the illusion, just for a few more hours, that her world was still safe and whole. I forced my legs to move, one foot in front of the other, a Herculean effort. I folded the papers neatly, crisply, and tucked them into the small, elegant clutch that hung from my wrist. A mask of serene composure settled over my features, an old and familiar friend. I had worn it for years at Jason's side, smiling through tedious dinners and laughing at the jokes of men I despised. Today it would serve a new purpose. It would be my armor. "Emily, darling, are you all right? You look a little pale." It was Chloe, my supposed best friend, her face a mask of perfectly feigned concern. Her husband, Logan, was one of Jason's oldest associates. She knew, of course she knew, this was likely a fact-finding mission. "Just a bit overwhelmed," I said, my voice smooth as silk, betraying none of the turmoil raging within. "You know how these things are, so much to manage." I gestured vaguely at the flawless party. "I think I just need a moment." "Of course," she said, her eyes flitting towards the spot where Jason had stood. "Jason can be so intense." "He's passionate," I corrected her, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. It was the word I had always used to defend his ruthlessness, his cold ambition. It was the lie I had told myself. "Excuse me, Chloe, I need to check on the cake." I walked away before she could respond, my posture erect, my steps measured. I was a queen surveying her domain, not a woman who had just been publicly executed. I moved through the party on autopilot, smiling, thanking guests for coming, complimenting children on their party dresses. Each pleasantry was a small victory, a defiance of the role he had just cast for me as the tragic, discarded wife. I was not a victim. I was a strategist gathering intelligence before a war. My true objective was the house. I needed to get to my study. I needed my tablet. The path there was an obstacle course of well-meaning but prying guests. I navigated it with a precision that would have made Jason proud if he had ever bothered to notice such skills. I finally made it to the French doors that led into the library, slipping inside and closing them quietly behind me. The sudden silence of the house was a balm. The air was cool and still, smelling of old leather and lemon polish. This was my sanctuary, the one room in the house that felt truly mine. Jason found it stuffy, preferring the cold, minimalist aesthetic of the rest of the mansion. But I loved the floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves, crammed with books I had actually read, not just purchased by the yard for decoration. My desk, a sturdy oak antique, faced the window overlooking the gardens. And on it, closed and unassuming, was my silver tablet. I walked over to it, my reflection a ghostly image on the dark screen. I looked pale, my eyes wide and dark in my face, but there was a hardness in my expression that I hadn't seen in a decade. It was the look of the girl I used to be, the one who graduated top of her class, the one who could find the lie in a 10,000-line ledger. Jason had tried to bury that girl under layers of silk and diamonds, but she was still there, and she was furious. I sat down in my worn leather chair, the divorce papers a cold lump in my clutch. I took a deep, shuddering breath and powered on the tablet. The screen lit up, showing a serene picture of a beach at sunset, another illusion of peace. My fingers hovered over the password field. My mind flew back 6 years. We were in St. Bart's, celebrating the closing of a massive, company-altering deal. Jason was drunk on champagne and success, more arrogant and expansive than I had ever seen him. We were on the balcony of our villa, the moon a silver coin in the black velvet sky. He had just bought me the tablet, a casual, expensive gift. "It's all connected," he'd slurred, waving a hand at the glittering sea. "My whole world, one little portal." He'd taken the tablet from my hands and typed something in, showing me a clean, deceptively simple login screen for a private network he called Aegis. "This is where the real magic happens, baby, the engine room." I'd asked him what it was for. "Asset management," he'd said with a wink. "All my legacy in one place, you should have the key just in case." And he'd whispered the password in my ear, his breath hot with alcohol and self-satisfaction. It was a joke to him, a grand gesture of trust in a wife he believed was too unsophisticated to ever understand, let alone use it. A wife he saw as another one of his assets. He had forgotten that moment. I never had. I remembered the exact string of characters. I remembered the smug look on his face. He thought he was letting me in on a secret. What he was really doing was handing me a loaded gun. My fingers typed the password, the clicks of the virtual keyboard the only sound in the silent room. MYLEGSCY99. The hypocrisy of it was staggering. His legacy, built on lies, greed, and the dismissal of anyone who was no longer useful to him. I pressed Enter. For a heart-stopping second, the screen simply showed a loading icon. My breath caught in my throat. Had he changed it? Was this all a figment of my desperate, humiliated mind? Then the screen flickered and resolved into a new interface. It was minimalist, black and white, with a single column of folders on the left-hand side. The names were innocuous, even boring. Real estate holdings, equity portfolio, trusts and foundations, miscellaneous assets. My training kicked in. The shock and rage receded, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. This was a puzzle, a balance sheet waiting to be audited. I wasn't a scorned wife anymore. I was a forensic accountant on the scent of fraud. I started with miscellaneous assets. It seemed like the kind of place an arrogant man would hide things in plain sight. A list of subfolders appeared, named after constellations. Cygnus, Orion, Lyra, Draco. I clicked on Cygnus. Inside was a single, heavily encrypted ledger file. A normal person would have stopped there, but Jason had made another mistake. In that same drunken conversation 6 years ago, he'd bragged about his encryption key, a secondary password based on something no one would ever guess: our anniversary. The day he had sworn to love and honor me. The irony was a physical pain. I typed it in. The ledger opened, and my world, for the second time that day, fell away. But this time, it wasn't fear or humiliation I felt. It was a dizzying, terrifying sense of power. It was all there. A meticulous shadow account of his entire financial life. The real one. The one built in the dark while I was busy creating a world of light and laughter for his clients and our daughter. Wire transfers to unregistered accounts in the Cayman Islands. Invoices for consulting services from shell corporations in Panama. Property deeds in Monaco and Dubai held by anonymous trusts. Bribes to foreign officials, illegal stock trades, a systematic pattern of tax evasion and money laundering so vast, so audacious, it took my breath away. He hadn't just bent the rules, he had rewritten the entire game in his favor. Men I had hosted for dinner, men like Andrew and Christopher, were listed as partners in these schemes, their names attached to transactions that would send them to prison for decades. I scrolled and scrolled, my eyes absorbing the damning data, the cold, hard numbers that told a story of profound corruption. The number at the bottom of the ledger, the true valuation of his legacy, was staggering. It was nearly 10 times his publicly declared net worth. An empire of smoke and mirrors, and I was staring directly into the machine room. But the most critical discovery, the one that made the air hiss from my lungs, was buried in a folder named Foundations. Inside was the master file for the central holding company, the sun around which all these other dark planets orbited. It was a company called AM. Holdings. I clicked on the incorporation documents, a scanned PDF of a legal filing in a tiny, obscure island nation I had never heard of. I scrolled down to the section listing the company officers and sole beneficiary. My heart stopped. It wasn't Jason's name. It was mine. Emily Annabelle Montgomery. It was a classic tax evasion and asset protection scheme, and it was brilliant in its arrogance. He had placed his entire illegal fortune in a series of trusts and corporations that were legally, indisputably, in my name. He had made me the paper owner of everything. Why? Because no one would ever suspect. I was the perfect front. The stay-at-home mother, the socialite, the woman concerned only with floral arrangements and seating charts. He had used me as his ultimate shield, confident in my ignorance, certain that I would never look, never know, never understand. He had insulated himself from all legal liability by making me the queen of his criminal enterprise. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. He had called me a bad investment. He had tried to liquidate me, but in his hubris, he had made a fatal miscalculation. He hadn't just given me the key to the kingdom. He had signed over the deed. The divorce papers in my clutch were meaningless. You can't divorce the owner of your entire world. You can't fire the person who holds the proof of every crime you have ever committed. He thought he was leaving me with a generous settlement. He had no idea that I was now in a position to leave him with nothing but the bespoke suit on his back. The humiliation, the pain, the years of feeling like a decorative object, it all coalesced into a single, diamond-hard point of resolve. I was no longer just going to survive this. I was going to win. I wasn't just going to take the money. I was going to dismantle his legacy, piece by criminal piece. He wanted to erase me from his life. I was about to erase him from his. I closed the ledger, the plan already forming in my mind, cold and precise. The party outside was still in full swing. Let them celebrate. It was the last party of the Jason Montgomery era. The dawn of a new one was about to begin. And I was in charge. The digital files lay open on my tablet, a silent, damning testament to a decade of deceit. For a few moments, I just stared, my mind a supercomputer processing terabytes of betrayal. The names of the shell corporations read like a twisted inside joke. EAM Enterprises, my initials, Ava's Future Fund, Rose Cottage Investments, named after the first home we'd bought. He had woven the fabric of our life into his criminal tapestry, making me an unwitting accomplice, the very symbol of the wholesome life he was funding with filth. The distant sound of Ava's laughter, high-pitched and joyous, floated in through the closed library doors. It was a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of a purely emotional response. Rage was a powerful fuel, but it burned hot and fast. I needed a cold fire, one that would burn long and bright enough to guide me through the labyrinth I now had to navigate. I needed a plan. My forensic accounting instincts, dormant for a decade, roared back to life. The first rule: secure the evidence. Leaving this treasure trove of incriminating data on a single network, even a supposedly secure one, was amateur hour. I connected my tablet to my private, encrypted cloud service, one I used for family photos and recipes, the last place Jason would ever think to look, and initiated a full system backup of the Aegis network. The progress bar crawled across the screen, each percentage point a small piece of my future being secured. It wasn't enough. Digital evidence could be wiped. I needed a hard copy. I slipped out of the library and went upstairs to my dressing room, my movements silent and purposeful. Tucked away in the back of my jewelry safe, behind velvet boxes of unworn diamonds, was a small, high-capacity encrypted hard drive. It was a relic from my college days, a gift from a tech-savvy professor who had preached the importance of redundant data security. I had kept it for sentimental reasons. Now, it was the most valuable thing I owned. Back in the library, I plugged the drive into the tablet. The download was faster this time, a direct transfer. As the files copied, I worked. My fingers flew across the screen, opening ledgers, screenshotting damning emails, tracing the flow of money from one illicit account to another. I was creating a roadmap of Jason's downfall. I saw a 7-figure payment to a government official in South America, disguised as a donation to a fictional charity. I saw an insider trade on a tech stock, made through an account in Zurich under the name of a man who had been dead for 5 years. I saw the systematic siphoning of funds from the pension plan of one of his own subsidiary companies. He wasn't just a crook, he was a predator, and his employees and investors were his prey. The download completed. I ejected the drive, holding it in my palm. It was cool and heavy, a dense little brick of pure power. I slipped it into the pocket of my dress. Just then, the library doors opened. My heart leaped into my throat. It was Mrs. Gable, our housekeeper, a kind, matronly woman who had been with us since Ava was born. "Mrs. Montgomery, forgive me for disturbing you. The caterers are asking about the cake. Is it time?" I composed myself instantly, the mask of the serene hostess slipping back into place. "Yes, Martha, thank you. Let's do it now. Can you have the music lowered a little and gather everyone near the patio?" "Of course," she said, her warm smile showing no sign that she suspected anything was amiss. As I followed her out, I tucked the tablet under a stack of architectural magazines on a side table. No one would touch it there. It was time for the final act of this charade. Walking back into the party was a surreal experience. It was like watching a movie of my own life. I saw the faces of our friends, people who had been in my home a dozen times, and I wondered how many of them knew, how many of them were complicit. I looked at Christopher and Andrew, Jason's top men, laughing near the bar. Their names were all over the files I had just secured, their digital signatures on transactions that could strip them of their fortunes and their freedom. They were dead men walking. Jason was standing near the towering, multi-tiered cake, a confection of pink frosting and spun sugar. He was holding Ava in his arms, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle. The sight of it, the perfect portrait of a doting father, sent a fresh wave of icy fury through me. He was using her, just as he had used me. She was a prop in the grand performance of his life. He looked up and saw me approaching. His eyes were cold, expectant. He thought I would be broken, tearful, perhaps cause a scene he could use to his advantage. He was waiting for the emotional outburst of the hysterical woman he was discarding. I gave him the one thing he didn't expect, a serene, beatific smile. "Darling," I said, my voice as sweet as the frosting on the cake, "it's time." I took my place beside him, a united front for the cameras of our guests' phones. We helped Ava hold the silver knife, her tiny hand sandwiched between ours. As the crowd sang "Happy Birthday," I met Jason's eyes over the flickering candles. His gaze was searching, confused by my composure. He was looking for a crack in the facade, a hint of the devastation he had wrought. I gave him nothing. I just kept smiling, a silent promise of the hell that was to come. The party began to wind down an hour later. The ponies were led away, the mermaid packed up her tail, and parents began collecting their sugar-fueled children. I stood at the grand entrance of our home, the perfect hostess to the very end, thanking everyone for coming. "It was a beautiful party, Emily," Logan said, shaking my hand while his wife, Chloe, gave me an awkward, pitying hug. "You have a real talent for this." "Thank you, Logan. It's all about attention to detail," I replied, looking him straight in the eye. He was another name I had seen, linked to a real estate deal in the Bahamas that reeked of fraud. When the last guest had departed, an oppressive silence fell over the house. The staff moved quietly, cleaning up the wreckage of the celebration. Jason had disappeared into his own study at the opposite end of the house. Good. The less I had to see of him, the better. After I tucked a blissfully exhausted Ava into bed, reading her a story about a clever princess who outsmarts a dragon, I returned to my library. The night was just beginning. I retrieved the tablet and sat at my desk. It was time to find a lawyer. I couldn't use any of the high-powered corporate firms Jason kept on retainer. They were his men. I needed someone outside his orbit, someone brilliant, tenacious, and most importantly, someone who owed him nothing. My mind sifted through the past, through the ambitious, idealistic people I had known before my life was absorbed by Jason. A name surfaced, Daniel Aarons. We had been in the same advanced accounting program in college. He was fiercely intelligent with a moral compass that was rigidly absolute. We had been study partners, friends, and had lost touch after I dropped out to marry Jason. I remembered Daniel telling me his dream was to fight for the little guy, to take on the corporate behemoths who thought they were above the law. I had no idea what had become of him, but it was a place to start. A quick search online found him. He was a partner at a small, highly respected boutique firm in the city that specialized in forensic litigation and white-collar crime. The firm's motto was printed on their homepage, Veritas vos liberabit, the truth will set you free. I found his private email address and began to type. I kept it brief, professional, and urgent. Subject, confidential matter Emily, formerly Hayes. Daniel. It's been a long time. I am in urgent need of legal counsel on a complex matter of corporate fraud and asset recovery. My situation is sensitive and requires the utmost discretion. I believe your particular expertise is exactly what I need. I have secured comprehensive and irrefutable evidence. The opposing party is Jason Montgomery. Please let me know your availability for an immediate consultation. Best, Emily Montgomery. I hit send, my heart pounding. This was it, the first official step towards reclaiming my life. Now for phase 2. I couldn't just sit on this information. Jason was a man of action. The moment he suspected anything, he would move to bury me, to hide his assets, to destroy the evidence. He had fired the first shot at the party. I needed to return fire, to let him know that I was not the victim he imagined. I needed to sow chaos and confusion, to knock him off balance. I went back into the Aegis network. I navigated through the labyrinth of folders to the central nervous system, the primary operating account for AM Holdings. It was a corporate account with a Swiss bank, the hub from which millions of dollars flowed in and out every week. It was the account that paid for everything, the bribes, the secret payrolls, the jet fuel, the Dom Perignon. As the sole listed officer and beneficiary of the company, the system gave me absolute authority. I could see the list of authorized users. There were 2, myself, and a user ID labeled JM Prime, his access. With a series of calm, deliberate clicks, I entered the administrative portal. I found the user, JM Prime. Beside it was a small, red icon that read, Revoke Access. I pressed it. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently revoke all access for this user? A cold, sharp smile touched my lips. I clicked confirm. The user ID vanished from the list. Just like that, Jason Montgomery was locked out of his own financial heart. But I wasn't done. He would assume it was a glitch, a system error. I needed to send a clearer message. I initiated a transfer. I didn't take everything. That would be too rash, too obvious. I was more subtle. I transferred exactly $10 million, a sum large enough to be catastrophic but small enough that it wouldn't automatically freeze the entire account, to a new, encrypted holding account I had just created, also in my name. Then I logged out. I wiped the browser history, cleared the cache, and shut down the tablet. I walked upstairs to the master suite, the vast, empty space we no longer shared. The hard drive was still in my pocket. I placed it in a new hiding spot, inside the hollowed-out spine of an old copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. It seemed fitting. I changed out of my party dress and into a simple silk nightgown. I stood for a moment on the balcony, looking out at the manicured lawns, the dark, silent pool, the ghost of the pink castle now deflated and sad on the grass. My gilded cage, but the bars were melting away. I had just gotten into bed when my phone, sitting on the nightstand, began to buzz. The screen lit up with his name, Jason. I watched it buzz, the vibration a frantic, angry tremor in the silent room. It stopped. A moment later, it started again. He was panicking. The alarms must have been screaming at him from his own computer. His fortress had been breached. His money was missing. His access was gone. He was blind. The ringing stopped again. A text message appeared. The letters were all in caps, a digital scream of fury and disbelief. "Where is the money? What did you do? Call me this instant." I looked at the message, at the desperate, impotent rage of a king who had just discovered his throne had been stolen from under him. He had called me a bad investment. He had served me divorce papers at our daughter's birthday party. He had tried to humiliate me, to break me, to erase me. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over his name. But I didn't call. I simply typed a one-word reply, a word he understood better than any other. Negotiate. Then I turned my phone to silent, placed it face down on the nightstand, and for the first time in a very long time, I slept. Sleep hadn't been a rest so much as a temporary ceasefire. I woke before dawn, the silence in the cavernous bedroom feeling different. It wasn't the lonely silence of a loveless marriage anymore. It was the strategic silence of a battlefield before the first charge. My phone lay face down on the nightstand, untouched. I felt a grim satisfaction in knowing he had spent the night stewing in a panic of his own making. I rose and dressed with quiet purpose, choosing a simple navy blue sheath dress and low heels. It was armor of a different sort, professional, serious, unassuming. I was no longer the lady of the manor in flowing linen. I was a woman on her way to a boardroom execution. Downstairs, the cleaning crew had erased all evidence of the previous day's extravagant joy and underlying horror. The house was pristine, sterile, and cold. I made coffee in the cavernous kitchen, the hiss of the espresso machine unnaturally loud in the quiet. I was sipping the strong, black liquid, staring out at the dew-covered lawn, when he appeared. Jason stormed into the kitchen, his face a thunderous mask. He was still in the clothes he'd worn to the party, his bespoke suit rumpled, his tie askew. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it all night. His eyes were bloodshot, burning with a furious, baffled rage. "What the hell did you do?" he snarled, his voice a low growl. He strode across the marble floor and slammed his hands down on the quartz island, inches from my cup. I didn't flinch. I took another slow sip of my coffee before answering, my calmness a stark contrast to his barely contained violence. "Good morning to you, too, Jason." "Don't play games with me, Emily. The Aegis account is locked. $10 million is gone. My access has been revoked. This has your fingerprints all over it." "You're surprisingly perceptive for someone who has spent the last decade assuming I was an idiot," I said, my voice level, cool. I placed my cup down gently. "To answer your question, I took what was mine." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "What's yours? Don't be absurd. You have your allowance, your credit cards, all of which, by the way, are about to be canceled. That money is the lifeblood of my business. You have no idea what you're meddling with." "Oh, I think I do," I said, letting a small, knowing smile touch my lips. "I've been meddling with AM Holdings. You know, the parent company for your entire legacy, the one registered in the Cook Islands, the one that pays for everything from your jet to your bribes. The one whose sole beneficiary and controlling officer is, according to the incorporation documents, one Emily Annabelle Montgomery. The color drained from his face. The furious bluster evaporated, replaced by a flicker of genuine, primal fear in his steel blue eyes. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. He had expected tears, hysterics, a desperate plea for him to take me back. He had not expected a forensic audit. "How?" he whispered, the single word a confession of his shock. "You told me the password yourself, 6 years ago in St. Bart's. You were drunk on your own genius and wanted to impress upon your simple-minded wife the scale of your brilliance. You called it the engine room. You just never imagined I'd have the intelligence to turn the key, let alone the courage to take the wheel." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. He straightened up, trying to regain his composure, to pull the familiar cloak of arrogant authority back around himself. "This is insane. You're going to destroy everything. That is a highly complex structure. You'll be in over your head in 5 minutes." "You're right about one thing," I conceded, standing up and rinsing my cup in the sink, my back to him. "It is a highly complex structure, a beautifully intricate web of fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. I spent a few hours last night admiring your handiwork. The shell corporation named after our first house was a particularly sentimental touch. I'm sure the SEC will think so, too." He was silent. I could feel the frantic calculations churning behind his eyes. He was trapped, and he was just beginning to understand the scale of the cage he'd built for himself, with me as the keyholder. "What do you want, Emily?" he asked, his voice now dangerously soft. The threats had failed, now came the negotiation. I turned to face him, leaning back against the counter. "I want what you were never going to give me, a fair deal, but the terms have changed. You came to me with a petition for dissolution. That's fine. We will have our divorce, but we will not be discussing settlements or alimony. We will be discussing the division of my assets, all of them." "You can't," he hissed. "I'll fight you. I'll drag your name through the mud. I'll prove you're an unfit mother. I'll take Ava. You will not win." The mention of Ava's name was the only thing that managed to pierce my icy calm. A cold dread washed over me, but I forced it down, refusing to let him see the chink in my armor. "You will not touch her," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more menace than any of his shouts. "You will not use our daughter as a pawn in the game you have already lost, because if you even try, I will not go to divorce court. I will go directly to the U.S. Attorney's office. I will hand them a hard drive containing every single crime you have ever committed. Your associates, Andrew, Christopher, Logan, all of them, will be implicated. You won't just lose your money, Jason. You will lose your freedom. You will trade your penthouse for a prison cell, and you will never see your daughter again. Now, is that a risk you're willing to take?" He had no answer. He just stared at me, his empire crumbling in his eyes. He, the master of the universe, the man who bent the world to his will, was utterly and completely checkmated. By me, his bad investment. "My lawyer will be in touch," I said, the words a perfect, satisfying echo of his own cruel dismissal. I walked past him, out of the kitchen, leaving him standing alone in the wreckage of his arrogance. My appointment with Daniel Aarons was at 9. His office was in a modest, older building downtown, a world away from the gleaming chrome and glass towers Jason's legal team inhabited. The waiting room was quiet and tastefully decorated, without a hint of the opulent intimidation I was used to. Daniel came out to greet me himself. The years had been kind to him. He had the same intense eyes and sharp intelligence I remembered, but now they were framed by a maturity and confidence that was reassuring. "Emily," he said, a warm, professional smile on his face as he shook my hand. "It's been too long. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Please come in." In his office, surrounded by stacks of legal books and case files, I felt a sense of purpose. I took the encrypted hard drive from my purse and placed it on his desk. "Before we talk, I need you to look at this," I said. "It's a complete backup of a private network belonging to my husband, Jason Montgomery." Daniel plugged the drive into his computer. For the next hour, he was silent, his eyes scanning the screen, a deep furrow forming in his brow. He clicked through files, opened ledgers, and read emails, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock and finally to a kind of awed disbelief. At one point, he let out a low whistle. "My God, Emily," he finally said, leaning back in his chair and looking at me with new eyes. "This isn't just a smoking gun. This is the entire arsenal. This is one of the most comprehensive and audacious schemes of white-collar crime I have ever seen. And it's all in your name." "I know," I said. "He used me as a shield. He thought I was too stupid to ever find out. And now you're in a position of unimaginable leverage, but also significant risk," he said, his legal mind immediately seeing all the angles. "If this goes public, you're the owner on paper. We'd have to frame this as you being a whistleblower, an innocent party who just discovered the extent of her husband's crimes. It's manageable, but messy." "I don't want it to go public," I stated clearly. "Not unless he forces my hand. I want to use this leverage to secure my daughter's future and to get out clean. I want him dismantled, but quietly if possible." Daniel nodded, his eyes gleaming with professional excitement. "A hostile takeover from the inside. I like it. He's left you in charge of a sinking ship, but you also hold the only lifeboat. We can use this to dictate the terms of the divorce completely. We don't just ask for assets. We execute a transfer of ownership. We draft a post-nuptial agreement that is, in effect, a corporate restructuring. He signs over everything that is legally clean, and in exchange, you agree not to release the evidence of everything that isn't." "He'll be left with nothing," I said. "That's the point," Daniel replied. "He'll have a choice: public ruin and a long prison sentence, or private annihilation and the freedom to start over with whatever he has in his wallet. Given the alternative, he'll take the deal." We spent another hour outlining the strategy, drafting the initial documents. For the first time in 10 years, I felt like myself again. I was sharp, engaged, my mind alive with a purpose beyond choosing canapés. I was a partner in my own rescue, not a passenger. I left Daniel's office feeling a surge of confidence I hadn't felt since before I'd met Jason. The path forward was fraught with danger, but it was clear. When I arrived back at the house, it was eerily quiet. Jason's car was gone. A part of me was relieved, but another part, a primal instinct, screamed that something was wrong. Mrs. Gable met me at the door, her face etched with worry. "Mrs. Montgomery, thank goodness you're here. Mr. Montgomery left about an hour ago. He took Ava." The world stopped. My blood ran cold. "What do you mean he took her?" "He said they were going for ice cream. He just packed a small bag for her and left. He seemed very upset." I ran up to Ava's room. Her closet was open. A small pink suitcase was missing. On her bed lay her favorite stuffed bear, the one she never, ever went anywhere without. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was an email, not from Jason, but from my new lawyer. Subject, urgent. "Emily, Jason has just filed an emergency motion for sole custody and a temporary restraining order against you. He's alleging mental instability and substance abuse. He's claiming you've become erratic and are a danger to your daughter. He's using your locking him out of the accounts as proof of your instability. A judge has granted a temporary order pending a hearing. He's legally allowed to take Ava. We need to fight this immediately. Call me." I sank down onto my daughter's bed, the email blurring in front of my eyes. The hard drive in my purse suddenly felt useless. He had outmaneuvered me. I had gone for his money, so he had gone for my heart. He had taken my child. The war was no longer about finances. It had just become about everything. The world narrowed to a single, terrifying point. Ava was gone. The legal jargon in Daniel's email, emergency motion, restraining order, mental instability, was just noise. The reality was a punch to the gut, stealing my breath, leaving me gasping in the silent, pastel-pink perfection of my daughter's room. Her favorite bear, left behind on the pillow, was a silent accusation. He had taken her without her comfort object, a small cruelty that spoke volumes. This wasn't about ice cream. This was an abduction, sanitized by the law. For a moment, I was paralyzed by a raw, primal fear that threatened to swallow me whole. This was the move I hadn't anticipated. I had been so focused on the financial chess match, on outsmarting the corporate predator that I had overlooked the cornered animal. And a cornered animal is at its most vicious. He couldn't attack my facts, so he was attacking my sanity. He was going after my identity as a mother, the one part of my life that was pure, the one thing I valued more than any fortune. I grabbed the stuffed bear, hugging its soft, worn body to my chest, and took a deep, shuddering breath. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Fear was a weapon he was using against me. I would not let him win. I stood up, the bear still clutched in my hand, and walked back to my library. My sanctuary, my war room. I called Daniel, my voice tight but controlled. He has her. I'm looking at the filing now, Emily. Daniel's voice was grim, but steady. It's a classic, dirty move. He's using your own actions against you, locking him out of the accounts as proof of erratic behavior. He's painting you as a scorned, vengeful wife having a breakdown. He's requested an immediate psychiatric evaluation. The hearing is in 48 hours. 48 hours? It felt like a lifetime. Where is she? Can we get her back? Legally, he has temporary custody. The order gives him the right to remove her from the home if he can argue she's in danger. It's flimsy, and it's built on lies, but for the next 48 hours, his possession is sanctioned by the court. Our first priority is the hearing. We need to dismantle his narrative completely. We need to prove you are not unstable, but calculated. And we need to show the judge exactly why you took the actions you did. You mean we use the evidence? I asked, my heart pounding. We don't have a choice, Daniel said. He's escalated this beyond a financial dispute. He's brought his criminality into a family court. We have to respond in kind. I'll file a countermotion immediately, arguing that his actions were not those of a concerned father, but of a criminal trying to silence a whistleblower who is also his wife. We're going to attach a sample of the evidence. Not everything. Just enough to let the judge know that this isn't about a marital squabble. This is about a man who will do anything, including using his own child as a shield, to hide a massive criminal enterprise. A cold resolve settled over me, displacing the fear. He had made his final, fatal mistake. By dragging Ava into the heart of his dark world, he had removed any lingering hesitation I might have had about using the nuclear option. My desire to keep this quiet, to dismantle him privately, was gone. He had threatened my child. Now I would burn his world to the ground and dance on the ashes. Do it, I said, my voice hard as steel. Give them a taste. Show them the wire transfer to the dead man in Zurich. Show them the pension fund embezzlement. And Daniel, find out where he's keeping her. I don't care what it takes. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I barely ate. I didn't sleep. I worked with Daniel and his team, a whirlwind of legal filings, affidavits, and strategy sessions. I provided them with a curated selection of Jason's crimes, each one more damning than the last. We documented my decade of service as his wife, the impeccable running of his homes, my role as a devoted, hands-on mother, gathering character statements from teachers, other parents, and even Mrs. Gable, who was horrified by Jason's actions. Meanwhile, Daniel's private investigator, a former FBI agent named Harper, got to work. Within hours, she had found them. Jason hadn't gone to his city penthouse or some five-star hotel. He had gone to ground. He had taken Ava to a remote, rented lake house in upstate New York, a place with no connection to him, paid for in cash through a third party. He was hiding. Not just from me, but from the storm he knew was coming. The knowledge of her location was a small comfort, a single point of light in the terrifying darkness. The morning of the hearing, I stood before the full-length mirror in my dressing room. I had chosen my clothes with the precision of a general preparing for battle. A simple, charcoal gray suit, a crisp white blouse buttoned to the collar. My hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. I wore no jewelry, save for my wedding band, a deliberate choice. I wanted to look like a wife, a mother, and a serious, credible woman. I did not want to look like a victim. But as I stared at my reflection, I saw the dark circles under my eyes, the strain in the set of my jaw. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. The family courthouse was a drab, institutional building, a far cry from the opulent settings that had defined my life with Jason. The air smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. I walked through the halls with Daniel at my side, my head held high, ignoring the stares of other people lost in their own private dramas. Jason was already in the courtroom, sitting at the plaintiff's table with a team of 3 expensive-looking lawyers. He looked confident, composed, every inch the powerful man wronged by an unstable woman. He met my gaze as I walked in, his eyes filled with a cold, triumphant hatred. He thought he had me. He thought he had found my weakness and was exploiting it perfectly. The judge was a stern-faced woman in her late 50s named Isabella, with intelligent, discerning eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She read the filings, her expression unreadable. Jason's lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Matthew, went first. He painted a picture of a loving, concerned husband and father, forced to take drastic action to protect his beloved daughter from a wife who had suddenly and inexplicably snapped. He described my locking Jason out of his own business accounts as a reckless act of sabotage, a sign of a dangerous, vindictive mental state. He presented my one-word text message, "Negotiate," as a threat, a sign of my manipulative nature. "Your Honor," Matthew concluded, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "Mr. Montgomery is a pillar of the community, a respected businessman. All he wants is to ensure his daughter's safety until Mrs. Montgomery gets the help she so clearly needs." Then it was Daniel's turn. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm and reasonable, "we are not here today to discuss a wife's alleged instability. We are here because Mr. Montgomery is a criminal, and his wife, my client, discovered the proof of his crimes. His actions in the past 48 hours were not born of concern. They were born of panic." Daniel laid out the timeline, starting with Jason serving me divorce papers at our 5-year-old's birthday party, calling me a bad investment. A flicker of distaste crossed Judge Isabella's face. Daniel then explained that my actions regarding the financial accounts were not erratic. They were the calculated and necessary steps of a corporate officer securing the assets of a company registered in her name, from a rogue actor. "And what proof do you have of these alleged crimes, Mr. Aarons?" the judge asked, her gaze sharp. "We have a great deal, Your Honor, but for the purposes of this emergency hearing, we have submitted 3 exhibits to the court." Daniel nodded to the clerk, who handed a file to the judge. "Exhibit A is a wire transfer confirmation for $2 million, authorized by Mr. Montgomery from an account in my client's name, to a shell corporation in Panama. The beneficiary of that corporation is a government official in Argentina, currently under investigation for corruption. Exhibit B is an excerpt from a ledger detailing the systematic underfunding of the pension plan for Montgomery Industries employees, a shortfall of over $30 million. And Exhibit C," Daniel paused, letting the weight of his words fill the room, "is the title deed for an account in Zurich, held in the name of a man who died in 2018, which Mr. Montgomery used to execute an illegal insider trade that netted him $12 million. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Jason's face was a mask of chalky white. His lawyer, Matthew, looked as if he'd been poleaxed. He was a divorce attorney, a shark in family court. He was not prepared for a federal racketeering case to detonate in the middle of his custody hearing. Judge Isabella read the documents, her eyes wide with shock. She looked up, not at Daniel, but at Jason. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated contempt. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "is there anything you would like to say in response to these exhibits?" Jason just sat there, mute. His arrogance, his confidence had shattered, leaving behind the small, terrified man who had built his life on lies. "I see," the judge said. She turned her attention to me. For the first time, her expression softened with something that looked like empathy. "Mrs. Montgomery, this court is rescinding the temporary restraining order and the emergency custody order, effective immediately. Mr. Montgomery's motion is dismissed with prejudice. Full, sole temporary custody of your daughter is granted to you. Mr. Montgomery is to have no contact with the child, pending a full investigation into these extremely serious allegations." She then looked back at Jason, her eyes like chips of ice. "And Mr. Montgomery, I am legally obligated to report the evidence presented in this courtroom to the District Attorney's Office and the Securities and Exchange Commission. I would advise you to retain a different kind of lawyer." immediately. The sound of her gavel was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was over just like that. I had won. Relief, so potent it was dizzying, washed over me. I felt Daniel's hand on my shoulder, a gesture of quiet victory. Across the room, Jason was huddled with his lawyers, his face a picture of utter ruin. He had overplayed his hand and lost everything. He met my eyes one last time. There was no hatred left, only a hollow, empty despair. He knew he was finished. Harper, the investigator, was waiting for us outside the courtroom with an address and a set of keys. I didn't wait for Daniel. I drove myself, my hands steady on the wheel, my entire being focused on one thing, getting to Ava. The lake house was beautiful, a secluded cedar cabin nestled among pine trees, overlooking a placid, gray lake. It was the kind of peaceful place families went to make happy memories. The irony was sickening. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Ava," I called out, my voice trembling. And then I saw her. She was in the living room, sitting on the floor, watching cartoons on a small television. She looked up, and her face broke into a radiant, beautiful smile. "Mommy," she cried, scrambling to her feet and running into my arms. I dropped to my knees and gathered her up, burying my face in her honey blonde hair, breathing in the sweet, familiar scent of her. I held her tight, the solidity of her small body in my arms, a confirmation that the nightmare was over. "I missed you, Mommy," she whispered into my neck. "Daddy was sad." "I missed you too, baby," I choked out, tears finally streaming down my face. They weren't tears of sadness or fear, but of profound, overwhelming love and relief. "So much, but I'm here now. Everything is going to be okay." And as I held my daughter, I knew it was true. The house, the fortune, the life I had known, it was all gone or soon would be, tied up in legal battles and federal investigations. Jason was a ghost, a relic of a past I was already leaving behind. But I had my daughter. I had my freedom. And for the first time in a decade, I had myself. I was no longer a wife, an accessory, or an investment. I was Emily, and my real life was just beginning.